think we got a nice turnout. Okay. And there's Rich, and there's Amy. Let's see. Yeah, we're up to almost 50 people now. That's impressive.
Jonathan, we're at 54. It doesn't look like, it looks like
All right.
people slowed down. So
Hey, Josephine, it's nice to see you here too.
Oh, and there's Tracy.
Hi, guys.
Hello,
Hi,
Tracy.
Tracy.
Well, I guess it's about time. I'll start the ball rolling. Good evening, folks. I'm Jonathan Roll. I'm chair of the local Hunterdon Warren Group. We're one of the groups of the state chapter of the Sierra Club of New Jersey. And before I introduce our speaker for tonight, I want to remind everybody that we have a special event later on this summer, which is the a talk or an outing run by Tracy Heisler, who is part of the Skylands Association, which is, they've taken a very strong lead in protecting our communities from warehouse development, particularly in the Asbury area. And she's been gracious enough to run a morning walk and talk during the, might say, the dog days of summer on August 28th at the Heritage Park. So keep your eyes open for that. And please, by all means, join us. It's not going to be a challenging hike. It's really meant just a nice stroll about with some information which keep you up to speed on keeping these warehouse developments at bay, as well as trying to give you some insights on how you can protect some of the lands in your neighborhood and communities as well. Well, tonight, the Hunterdon Warren Group and the Central Jersey Group are presenting Corey Tierney. He's the director of the Warren County Land Preservation Department. And he's going to talk with us about warehouses and preservation. And he'll provide us like an overview of Warren County's farmland, open space, and historic preservation efforts. But a key part of this talk near the end will be just some pointers for you specifically. If you see some land which you cherish and you feel that needs to be preserved, how do you start the ball rolling? How do you get the community involved? How do you advocate to keep that plot of land, no matter how humble or grand it is, safe from development? So tonight, thank you. I'm turning it over now to Corey. And as far as the reminders to keep your sound off, and during the presentation, unless Corey invites questions, try to keep them in the at the end or put them in the chat box, and we'll get to them eventually. All right, thank you. Corey.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everybody. As Jonathan said, my name is Corey Tierney. I'm the Director of Preservation for Warren County. Tonight, I'm going to talk about our preservation efforts in the county, but this is applicable to any county. in particular Hunterdon County. They have very similar programs to the ones that we have, and they do a fantastic job there as well. So, so with that, we'll get started. I'll first start with just highlighting some of our programs and projects, and then, as Jonathan mentioned, we'll talk about the preservation process a bit more, and steps, tips on how you guys can support these efforts. So we have 3 county programs: the Farmland Preservation Program, the Open Space Preservation Program, and the Historic Preservation Program. So I'll touch on each of these as we go through. So first, with farmland preservation, if you're not familiar with it, farmland preservation is a voluntary program. Landowners apply, and we work with the State Ag Development Committee normally. And so what we do is we purchase the development rights on that property, so it remains in private ownership. The farmer continues to own it exclusively. However, there are restrictions that are placed on the property which limit it to agricultural use in perpetuity. So it can only ever be used as farmland. And there's a number of restrictions in the deed of easement, which is about 10 pages long. But the primary purpose is to keep that property as working agricultural lands. So I'll touch on these bullet points as we go through, but we've grown our farmland preservation program to over 313 properties, comprising over 27,000 acres of land now. So in this chart here, on the top, you can see the number of farms preserved, and then on the bottom, you can see the acres preserved. And so the blue lines show the annual totals, and then the brown area in the back shows the cumulative total. And so it varies quite a bit from year to year. Some years we have more than others. On average, lately, in the past 5-10 years, we've approached about 1,000 acres a year. We're hoping to get over that this year. So the charts don't tell the full story. I'm going to move pretty quickly because I have a lot of slides and a lot of pictures. But I just wanted to highlight a few of the projects, a few of the farms that we've permanently preserved over the years. So this is the Drake Farm in Alamucci Township, 198 acres. The Hart Farm in Franklin Township, 388 acres. The Merlin Farm in Frelinghuysen Township, 224 acres. Brook Hollow Winery in Knowlton, and that was 19 acres. And then we've also completed 2 what we call fee simple acquisitions, where we purchase the farms directly. We then preserve them and resell them at public auction. And so we did the Waddles Farm back in 2011, which was about 210 acres. And then we purchased it, we preserved it with the SADC, and then we auctioned it. And we sold it as 2 separate preserved farms, although it ended up being purchased by one farmer. And we also did the same thing with the O'Dowd Farms in Greenwich and Franklin Township in 2017. And that was another 200 acres. And similarly, we preserved it as 2 separate working farms. And we put that out to auction, and another local farmer bought both pieces. So we've preserved quite a bit of farmland. We're proud of that. 27,000 acres is a lot. But it's not enough. So on the left, we have a map of Warren County, and on the right, we have a map of the state of New Jersey. And on both maps, preserved farmland is shown in dark brown. And so you can see the parcels, that we've preserved. As much as we've preserved, there's still a lot of, white space. There's still a lot of, on the left map, it'd be light brown, farmland that has not been protected, and that is still, subject to or susceptible to development. And so we continue to do our outreach. We have a target list, which I'll talk about later, and we try to preserve these farms. So I'll come back to the process, but that's just a quick overview of our farmland preservation program. And then next, I'd like to turn to our open space program. So for open space, we've now purchased and preserved about 150 properties, totaling over 2,300 acres. We hold and manage these as county parkland. We also have a program, a municipal and charitable program for municipalities and nonprofits, where we administer grants, and I'll come back to that later as well. And then the rest of these bullet points I'll cover as we move through the slides. So again, another similar chart just showing that, year to year, what we purchase and preserve fluctuates, but we've, the trend has steadily gone up. So we keep acquiring land and adding to our open spaces. So I want to turn to some of the projects that we've completed. Again, the charts only tell part of the story. The first, I guess, series of projects I'd like to highlight are along the Morris Canal Greenway. And so the Morris Canal, if you're not familiar with it, it's stretched from the Delaware River over near Phillipsburg all the way to Jersey City on the Hudson River. And so it crossed over 100 miles of land, and it overcame an elevation change of, I think, over 1,600 feet. And it did that by using 23 locks and 23 inclined planes. And so in its heyday, it was a modern, marvel, and it's now a historic landmark. But Warren County has, for the past 30 years, been working to try to preserve the remaining sections or segments of the canal, which haven't been destroyed or developed over. So it's no longer one contiguous canal. Much of it has been, paved over, built over, but there are significant sections of it that remain. And so what we've done in Warren County is we've used that as an anchor, and then we have a series of parks now along the Canal Greenway, and those parks are sort of they're independent, local parks. So we'll start in the west. So this is in Lopatcong Township, and so just near Phillipsburg. And in the light green are parcels that we've acquired or easements that we've acquired, and then dark green is previously preserved lands. But we've been able to string together properties along the canal, open space, and improve the clear trails for recreation. So we have a section west of Route 22 that connects into Phillipsburg. And then we have east of 22, another section which connects over into our Port Warren Park in Greenwich Township. And so this is a picture of the Lock Street Park in Phillipsburg in Lopatcong Township. So on the left, you can see the Lopatcong Creek passing under a bridge on Lock Street. And then to the right, out of the frame of the picture, is an inclined plane, where they used to pull the canal boats up the slope. And then as we head east from there, we go into Stewartsville area. And so again, in the light green are parcels that we've acquired recently. The dark green are previously preserved parkland. And then here also we have in light brown preserved farms, which were part of the O'Dowd farms. And so those were, I showed you previously, those were two that we auctioned off. But so this whole area here has been preserved, with the exception of, you can see there was a solar development, and we had tried to preserve that property as well, but it was instead developed as solar, but we were able to acquire an easement along the back of the property. And so this is 60 acres, which was shown here in green, O'Dowd North. And so this is from Route 57 looking south across 60 acres of field. We were able to preserve this with a US EPA supplemental environmental project funding. And so we took it out of agricultural production. It's now managed as warm season grasses with New Jersey Audubon. And so it is, I should say, it is harvested and it's used for mushroom cropping, but with strict limitations so that it's really for wildlife habitat purposes. And then if we continue east a bit further, here we have the Port Murray Preserve. And so again, you know, we're stringing together properties along the Morris Canal. Here we hope to connect in the lower left-hand corner is Port Colden. And then we hope to connect this through up into Port Murray. And so we'd have a port-to-port connection. And just a little history, you know, tidbit in Warren County, you'll notice that some of the areas are named port, and that's because they were ports to the old canal. So here we've got several hundred acres of forest that we're, you know, connecting together. We have tributaries into the Musconetcong. So it's not just the canal, you know, we're trying to build off of that and create greenways that include, you know, forested lands, different habitats, and protect those as well. And then just to the north of that, outlined in brown, we have a 300-acre farm that we currently are preserving. We hope to complete that this month, actually. So here's a picture of the old canal at Port Murray Park. And then if we head still further east into the Hackettstown area, we have another park, Mount Rascal Park and Preserve. So here we acquired different tracts and we preserved a significant section of the Morris Canal, but it adjoins New Jersey Natural Lands Trust Preserve. And so there's a tributary to the Musconetcong River. The headwaters of that tributary are protected in the preserve. And this entire area, which is over 400 acres, is you know, now permanently preserved and protected and open to the public. We have some limited trails there. So here again, you can see on the left is the canal basin, which acts as a vernal pool. And then on the right, you can see the Hackery Brook, which is a tributary. So those are our parks that are along the Morris Canal Greenway. Other counties, you know, are also trying to develop theirs to the extent they have in Morris County, Sussex County, and eastward. But if you want to learn more about the Morris Canal, morriscanalgreenway.org is a great resource, as well as the Canal Society of New Jersey's website. And so this is an old photo of Waterloo Village in the canal, which is just beyond the Warren County border. But they are actually coincidentally having a canal day this Saturday. So if you're interested in the canal, you can go visit. So a little history. In addition to the Morris Canal parks, we also have 3 sizable, what we call natural resource areas, which are additional parks where hunting is permitted. So just north of Phillipsburg, we have the Marble Hill Natural Resource Area. And here we did a land swap with the township of Lopatcong to consolidate our greenway. And this allowed for a connection of the Warren Highlands Trail, which will meander across Warren County for about 50 miles from Phillipsburg all the way to Alamuchee, and it'll pick up with the Highlands Trail there. But it passes through some of our beautiful, you know, natural areas. It includes state lands, county lands, nonprofit lands with New Jersey Conservation Foundation and Merrill Creek and a whole number of areas. So this was an important connection for us. And here's a photo of the trail. And that trail actually also will pass through Oxford Mountain Natural Resource Area. So here we purchased additional parcels in light green, and you can see how we're trying to, you know, build upon what we had previously and connect these green spaces so that, you know, there's natural corridors for wildlife and also for, you know, outdoor recreation. So here, this is a photo of Oxford Mountain taken from the south, looking north. And so on the left, we have preserved from Brass Castle Road to the right on Route 31, nearly this entire mountain. There's a couple parcels that we would like to preserve, but most of this has been preserved now. And last but not least, we have a White Lake Natural Resource Area up in Hardwick. This is a beautiful park if you've never been there. We've been developing it and building our greenway there over the years. So again, light green are new parcels, but the one that's special to me is the Svenningson track, which is down in the lower left-hand corner there. And it's smaller than some of the others, but it was important because it allowed us to develop a trail around White Lake, which has become very popular. So we manage White Lake with the help of the New Jersey Youth Corps, which I'll talk about in a moment. But we, manage it for habitat, and it's just a beautiful lake if you've never been there. So here's another map, Warren County on the left, another map of the state on the right. And again, dark green is showing the open space, preserved parcels. But again, you can see there's a lot of white space. There's still a lot of land that is not protected, not preserved, is developable. And so, we have our open space plan at the county level, and we focus on adding to additional greenways, adjoining parcels to parks, trying to tie things together. But if there is a particularly special, parcel that's rich in natural resources, and we will take a look at that. But for the most part, we've been very strategic in our acquisitions. So once we preserve the property, then what do we do with it? So what we try to do is we try to manage that and balance, conservation with recreation. So it's important that we protect the natural resources that are there to the extent that we can, restore some of those areas. At the same time, we think it's important to make these publicly available. Green Acres funding is often used, and that's a requirement. So we do have, a limited trail network that we try to maintain. We do try to, provide access to these areas for people to enjoy. And so it's a challenge to try to balance that, but we think we're doing our best. So we created the warrenparks.com website to try to educate our residents and the general public about what we have here. It's a fledgling system, but it's growing and it's coming along. So you can find out more information about the parks that I've briefly highlighted, as well as some others, on our website. And in addition, we started offering some limited recreation programming. So we have free kayak rentals at White Lake in Hardwick. We had some free yoga classes there. And so we're continuing to try to develop those programs. We also worked with a county health department. We were able to secure some grants that provided bike racks and some kayaks and some signage. And we've partnered with the Nature Conservancy, the Ridge and Valley Conservancy, the New Jersey Audubon, and the New Jersey Youth Corps over the years to try to manage not just White Lake, but our other properties as well. In 2015, we also created the Warren County Parks Foundation, which has been a great vehicle to help organize volunteers and to support our parks and our open space preservation efforts. So in addition to maintaining them and running some programs, we've also developed 20 miles of trails, 11 parking areas, 3 pavilions, dozens of kiosks and picnic tables and benches. We've made a number of other improvements. Here's some pictures of the Warren Highlands Trail. This is the loop around White Lake, which I had mentioned earlier, which is a great hike. It's about 3 to 4 miles around the lake. And then we also were able to secure funding through the US EPA, that supplemental environmental project I had mentioned earlier. So we were able to develop about a mile of trail along the canal Greenway on the O'Dowd track. We installed a dock at White Lake for kayaking and fishing. And so here's a great example where we did this to try to provide recreation, but also we were having difficulty with some people trampling sensitive, rare plants along the shoreline. And so we provided them with with an outlet and other means to fish there to help us protect some of those plants. We also facilitated some in-stream restoration work, working with Trout Unlimited on the Little Patcon Creek. They did a tremendous job down there. Seems to be coming along quite nicely. And last year we actually won an award for a trail bridge, which we installed along the Morris Canal Greenway. And so this is a section just outside of Hackettstown, and it's county property that connects into Alamusha Mountain State Park. And so it's a hard to access area. We were able to get a state grant, and in addition to county funds, and we purchased a 60-foot aluminum bridge. It was a giant erector set. Our bridge department did an excellent job assembling it and worked with the state parks folks to put that in place. So now it was an important connection. It now provides access to about a 5-mile walk through Alamusha Mountain State Park all the way to Waterloo Village. And this is just some of the canal history along the way that you can see. But as I mentioned, we had a ribbon cutting for it. And it was, it's a great project, so we're pretty proud of it. But all these improvements and all the progress we've made wouldn't have been possible without our volunteers. We're fortunate to have so many tremendous volunteers helping us along the Morris Canal. We have the Jim and Mary Lee Museum at Plane 9. They give tours and talk about the canal history, as well as our volunteers at Breadlock Park. We also have a great partnership with the New Jersey Youth Corps of Phillipsburg, and they help us to maintain our parks and trails. And as I mentioned, we have the Parks Foundation volunteers, and they also help to maintain everything and promote awareness about our parks and the importance of these spaces. So that's it for open space, and I'll turn next to historic preservation briefly. So as I said, we have a grant program. I'll talk about the process in a moment, but we give out grants to towns and nonprofits for open space preservation, but also for historic preservation. We have some other history and arts programming available, but I won't digress into that. So these are some of the historic sites around Warren County that we've helped to preserve and restore. And so it's quite varied, but it kind of makes up the fabric of Warren County. And so a lot of special places. So here's an example. We have the Shimer Manor on the top in Pohatcong and the Ramseyburg Homestead in Knowlton on the bottom. And we have the before pictures on the left and the after pictures on the right. And so, the groups that we provide the funding, but the groups that really spearhead these projects do a tremendous job. It's a lot of work, but the end result really speaks for itself. And these areas, these buildings really become little community centers, which is great. And here's another one in Phillipsburg, the Roseberry House, dating back to the 1700s. And this is actually located right next to a school. And so also, is used for some historic education, but, what was once a blight on the town, was restored and is now a real gem. And the Hoffman Meadow Farmstead in Harmony Township is another great example. And last but not least, the Asbury Mill on the bottom. You can see some before pictures on the left, after pictures on the right, as well as their Musconetcong Watershed Association's River Resource Center. So on the left, on the top left is what it used to look like. And then they did a tremendous job restoring it. It's now a LEED certified building. And that kind of brings me back to the point too, where these are historic preservation projects, but there is a sustainability element to that. We like to see these buildings reused rather than torn down and something else built in its place. I think that's, a more sustainable use of the materials. But so those are our programs and our projects. I know I went kind of fast, but there's a lot of pictures I wanted to go through. So next I want to turn to the process. So we'll look at the land preservation process first. And so both the farmland preservation and the open space preservation processes are pretty similar. They start with an application. They're both voluntary programs. We appraise the property, we work with the state, and then there's no cost or obligation to the landowner. After we appraise the property, we will make them an offer. Generally, the appraisals, are fair market value, best as we can measure it, and they're free to reject or accept our offer. If they reject it, there's some rules that we have to wait a period of time before we can make them another offer. But if they accept it, then we enter into a contract. There's legal review. We then conduct due diligence, which includes surveys, inspections, title, and legal work, and then we proceed towards a closing. The preservation projects are funded in a variety of ways. So there's federal funding, there's state funding, county funding, municipal funding, and nonprofits can also bring funding to the table. And so we try to find the best funding source for for a particular project. Sometimes one entity might be interested in a certain project and others aren't. There might be different criteria or priorities. And so we try to find ways to preserve, properties, whatever it takes. So I won't get into all these, into too much detail here, but there's a lot of options. The different programs have different rules. There are different strings attached, and depending on whether it's farmland or open space, we try to find a way to move that project forward and ultimately preserve it. And sometimes projects move very quickly. Sometimes we can preserve open space in 6 to 9 months. Other times I've worked on projects that have taken 10 years to preserve. Most don't take that long, but sometimes they do. And so it's an ongoing effort. So for farmland, there's a lot of benefits that we try to communicate to the general public, but also to the landowners. So there's benefits to the farmers. Obviously the proceeds of preservation, they can use those funds to pay down or pay off debt. They can buy additional equipment or materials, acquire more land. And I've seen farmers do all of those things. But preservation also keeps agricultural viable. So the land remains available, it remains farmable, and it's also more affordable. So after they sell the development rights, it's more affordable to future farmers. And then there's also benefits to the community. It maintains the rural beauty, access to local food, stops unwanted development, and avoids the tenant costs of sprawl. That being said, I would go back to what I said earlier about the farmland preservation program. It is different than open space. The purpose of farmland preservation is to preserve not just the soil and the land that supports agriculture, but to really preserve those agricultural operations. And so farmland funding is available. There are certain minimum requirements to qualify. There's a tillable land requirement, for instance. The property also, has to have some development value to it. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis. Generally takes about 18 months. We try to shorten that as best we can, but there are sometimes obstacles that we encounter, which I'll touch on in a moment. In Warren County, payments usually range between $3,000 and $7,000. I think our average for the past 5 years has been about $4,500 per acre. I'll talk about how that's calculated. The values in Hunterdon County are going to be different. They just have different land values than we do. The farm remains private property. It's not publicly accessible like open spaces, and it's limited to agriculture. So the minimum requirements for the state, it's got to be eligible for farmland assessment, and it has to be within an agricultural development area, which is an area which is set forth in the county's farmland preservation plan or municipalities. And then it has to have the lesser 50% or 25 acres tillable. At the county, we had our rule was 40 contiguous acres under common ownership. We actually just recently reduced that to 20 acres. And so now we will also target and process farms that are smaller. And the municipalities and nonprofits can also preserve those. So as I said, sometimes we encounter some delays. These include encroachments, neighbor has a shed over the property, or there's another driveway, that doesn't have a recorded easement with it. So we encounter a number of things. So sometimes it, causes a little bit of delay, but we work through those. Unpermitted road access, mortgage subordinations, judgment creditors. Every farm's different. Every story is different. But these are some of the common delays that we see. So the way that the easement is calculated is we hire 2 appraisers. They visit the farm, and then they look at comparable sales. They try to find sales that are close in both proximity and also, in time recently. So, and they'll look at similarly sized farms and farms with similar characteristics. So they try to find, the best comparable sales they can. And then they will determine what, that farm's estimated value is with all of its development rights. So let's say it's $1 million. And then they do the same analysis, look for similar comps for preserved farms. And let's say, that the farm, if preserved, would be worth $600,000, then we pay the difference of $400,000. So in their analysis, they'll make adjustments for differences and so forth. But and those appraisals are then sent down to the state for review by a third appraiser for a certified market value, which is the basis of our offer. And so, it's a very thorough process, but it does take some time. Once preserved, we also monitor the farms, and as I said, they're restricted. So, we don't normally have as many issues with the owners who preserve the farm as much as with people who buy a farm after it's been preserved. But we have encountered issues with development and concerts and events and dumping and excavation and all sorts of things. And so the public made an investment in these farms, and so we do monitor and enforce those restrictions. So the process for open space, as I said, is similar. We do the similar appraisal offer. Here with an open space parcel, we would value it outright. There is no easement value. It's just a fair market value of the property. The benefits are slightly different. So, it helps to control sprawl, just like, farmland does, but it also helps to protect watershed, aquifer recharge areas, protect habitat, carbon sinks, forests, wetlands. It also provides clean air, water, outdoor recreation and exercise. And then, it supports the local recreation, ecotourism economy. And studies have shown that it can increase, surrounding property values, and provide, protect the natural capital ecosystem services there. So there's a lot of benefits to open space, which, we really need to continually communicate. one additional caveat to the open space process that we don't encounter with farmland easements. Because we're purchasing the property outright and becoming the owner, we have to really take a close look at any environmental, what we call areas of concern. So any environmental risks. So we do an environmental analysis, an inspection on the property, work with the landowner to address any barrels, any mysterious, fill material, all sorts of things. And we do that in conjunction with the DEP to make sure that everything is properly remediated and cleaned up. So that's just one additional item that can cause delay. The process for historic sites is slightly different. I'm not going to get into too much detail here tonight with it, but we do have grants available. As I said, we have $500,000 available this year. Those grant applications are out there now. They're due back June 17th, and then we'll go through our process of reviewing those, and the Municipal and Charitable Conservancy Trust Fund Committee will take a look at each one, and then they make a recommendation to the county commissioners. But when planning for those types of projects, it's important to really look at the structure of the site, develop plans, work with architects, professionals, contractors, develop estimates, look at the permitting that might be required, and then how is the property going to be managed going forward in a sustainable way. So MCCT grants are available for 50% of acquisition costs or up to 75% of restoration costs. Sites have to be eligible to be listed on the New Jersey Historic Register. Restoration has to follow the Secretary of Interior standards. And we also place permanent preservation restrictions on those sites afterwards. So there's a lot of historic sites out there, and we get a lot of calls and inquiries. There are a lot of old buildings that people would like to save. Unfortunately, we don't have the means or funding resources to save them all. And it's really important if you have a site in mind to think about, first, is it historically significant? Next, what is the public use, the public benefit going to be to justify, public funding into that site? And lastly, is there a plan to make that viable and sustainable? So that, that organization, that structure, it can be maintained, and, they're not going to come back, again, in 5-10 years because they, failed to make repairs. So we look at all of those things very closely. But, there are still a lot of great sites out there. It's just a lot of thought really needs to be given before going into one of these projects, because they are expensive and takes a lot of time and energy. So those are the processes. Next, more generally, I wanted to talk about how you can support preservation. So on the left, we have Franklin Township in Warren County, and on the right, we have Jersey City. They're both beautiful, in their own way, and they're very different. And New Jersey is unique in that regard. When people hear that I'm from New Jersey, they probably think, I'm from something like on the right, when in fact I'm from something on the left. But it's on the left here is a planning transect. So it shows just this natural this development spectrum, right, from natural area on the left, and then as you move towards the urban area. And you can kind of see that when you compare it to our state population density. And so, there's only so much natural rural areas left. And so, it's really important that we protect it. But I just wanted to share this. I thought it was really interesting. So these are called megalopolis areas. And so these are major metropolitan areas which are, essentially growing together. And so we are in the most populated megalopolis, spanning from Boston all the way down to Washington, D.C. And in the Northeast corridor, we have 50 million people, and it's projected to grow to, I think, 58 million by 2025. And so in the, over the past maybe 10 years, we saw the development pressure recede a bit following the real estate bubble and, the Great Recession. But we're starting to see that pressure come back. And this is just a fascinating photo for me, taken by the International Space Station back in 2012. But this is, the Eastern Seaboard at night. And, those bright yellow areas are lights, and that's, where the development is. And, for decades, it's, it's been expanding. They're growing together, and then they're also growing out. And I've lived in this area now for nearly all my life, and over the past 40 years, I've seen a lot of changes, and we're seeing a resurgence of development pressure now, and I think it's really important that we continue to preserve as much as we can while we can. So what can you do? Start local. So look for properties in your neighborhood, in your town, in your county, but look for properties that you think should stay the way they are, and then find out more about them. So if they're not already preserved, who owns them, whether the landowner is amenable to selling. There are some useful tools that you can use now, that anybody with a computer and internet can go on to New Jersey Conservation Blueprint, which is a fantastic mapping tool. You can put in an address. You can look up block and lot numbers. There's a bunch of different layers that you can look at, natural resource values, and it's just a great tool to try to identify what's around you, what's preserved, what's not preserved. There's other tools. DEP's GeoWeb has similar mapping. SADC has another mapping tool. But ultimately, look at the land around you, and then ask, does your municipality have an environmental resource inventory? Does it have an open space or farmland preservation plan? Does it have an open space trust fund? How is the municipality putting money into preservation? And we've seen a number of municipalities that have diverted those funds for active recreation use. They're no longer, where at one time they were, the purpose of it was to preserve land. Now they're using it for recreation purposes. We've seen, a number of municipalities reduce their open space trust fund over the years. If there's an open space committee or an ag advisory board, you can try to, get involved with that. If not, you can try to work with town leadership to create one. And ultimately, we try to preserve as much as we can at the county level. I know the state, officials try to do the same, but it really, I can't overstate the importance of having local people involved, and it really does make a difference when when you have the town's support. When you don't have the town's support, it is very difficult to preserve properties. So that's my advice. But another way to get or to lend support to preservation is to support a lot of the organizations, the groups that are already doing this, that have been doing this for years. There's a number of great groups out there. They all have their different niche and their different focus areas. But see what you want to prioritize in your area, and then try to find an organization that maybe has an overlapping interest and can assist you with that. So if you have a project in mind, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help. we'll try to find a way. Even if you're in Hunterdon County, feel free to contact me. I can try to give you some advice, and at the very least, I can put you in touch with my colleagues down in Hunterdon. And so I think that's about it. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Well, thank you very much, Corey. It was excellent presentation, and we do have a number of questions in the chat. We'll do them, and I'm sure other folks might have some follow-up questions that they can do verbally. There's one comment from Pat that Franklin Township has basically shut down open space committee activities using substantial funds for other purposes. They feel that they preserved enough property. What can the county do to educate the township community? Educate the township committee.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that it's a lack of understanding as much as it's just a lack of will. Municipalities have a lot of say and control, and rightfully, over what happens within their borders. At the county level, with preservation, we work with municipalities that want to preserve land. It's hard to, from the county, down to the municipality, like a top down. It's really hard to try to convince them otherwise. I think what's more helpful is when the residents themselves, the voters in that town, whom those elected officials are accountable to, when the voters communicate to their leaders that they want to see more preservation, and and they organize, and I think that is the most effective way to try to bring the municipality around. That can take time, but it's probably your best bet.
Okay. Dan Strumborn asks, are solar panels compatible with open space preservation?
So not with open space preservation, to my knowledge. There are some exceptions to that. So like if you have a park, an existing building, for instance, you can put like rooftop solar and things like that, but it wouldn't be compatible with like a large solar array on open space. Similarly, with farmland preservation, the SADC is passed a solar rule, which limits solar installations to, I think, 1% of the farm area or 110% of the farm's prior energy use for the prior calendar year. So the farmland preservation is also restricted as to the solar it can install. There is a pilot program that the state had, SADC and the BPU are working on with agrivoltaics, but that's limited right now. I haven't actually seen those projects developed, so we're interested to learn more about that and what are the pros and cons and how viable it is. But right now it's more theoretical, and I know our ag board has some questions about it.
I'm actually confused what you just said. There's certain types of, there's a different type of panel that they're coming.
So yeah, agrivoltaics, it's this new thing, or at least new to me. I think there's a history with it in some other countries and maybe some other areas of this country, but essentially they install solar arrays and then they try to farm beneath or in between those arrays. Mm-hmm. And so some plants reportedly will grow better in the shade, if they're shade tolerant plants. They can also graze animals. The arrays I've seen have different, they're different construction methods. There are some, are large and they can even fit equipment beneath them, but they require very, large footings and steel infrastructure. Others are a bit lower, and then they can grow grass or, shade tolerant vegetables and that sort of thing.
All right, thank you. Bill Hanaschewski says, thanks, Corey. With increased pressure to develop our ecologically and naturally important lands and with plenty of municipalities settling rather than deal with the cost to fight with a fair share housing center and others, it is truly a race against time. What advice can you give municipalities who want to continue to fight to preserve and protect open space, and particularly when they have to deal with the Mount Laurel decision and fair share housing and so on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with Green Acre, if you use Green Acres funding for preservation, I know if a town has designated as part of its fair share plan or settlement, if it's designated certain parcels for affordable housing, those become ineligible to preserve. So it's really important. So at the local level, these decisions are being made by town leadership, town council, and the land, with some review and advice by the land use boards. And so as they are designating those parcels, if you see a parcel that you want to preserve, it's important to sort of monitor what the town's doing and make sure that they're not planning to put their affordable housing units there, because once they've designated it, it's very difficult to preserve. You'd have to really have the town go back and redo their affordable housing plan. Yeah, I think it just goes back to my previous answer. You really need to try to organize people within the town at the local level, and try to get your local leaders, to prioritize preservation. If there's an open space trust fund, look at how that money is being spent, whether it's been reduced over the years, whether the residents in town, want to see that money go towards projects, and so those are all local decisions that the residents really need to investigate.
Yeah, because I know, like in the town of Clinton, they had 2 plots of land, and they said, well, you don't have to put fair housing on here as long as you could put it there. And so I guess with that agreement, even the land that's not supposed to get fair housing is now spoiled because the commitments have been made to build non-fair housing on that land in order to appease the developer to put more fair housing on another plot of land. So there's a lot of shenanigans like this, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, Tracy asks, does the county have a plan to address the significant spending power that developers are offering landowners? It's hard to say no to offers that outspend preservation many times over.
Yeah, that's another great question. So when we use state funding, which we have used primarily, they've fund, like SADC funds 60% of the projects often. Green Acres will fund 50% of the projects. We have to go through their appraisal process, and so that's set forth, by law and in their regulations. The appraisals will take into account sales. So if developers, end up buying land for more money, those will show up as comps, but it's always sort of lagging, right? We're always sort of a little bit behind because we're looking backwards at value. The appraisers try to look at trends and maybe project forward a little bit, but it is difficult. We are at a disadvantage. We can only, with the SADC, for instance, with farmland preservation, we can only go up to the highest of the 2 appraisal values. Otherwise, if we wanted, even if we wanted to pay more than that, we would lose all the SADC funding. Green Acres is a little bit better in that regard. they will limit what they contribute based on their certified appraisal value, but they will allow you to go up, above the highest appraisal value as long as you can, justify it. So I don't.
So if I understand you right, you're saying is, let's say I have a plot of land and a developer wants to offer me $1 million. You guys assess it as only worth 500,000. Green Acres could say as well, we can contribute to the 500,000 and you're welcome to go and get other added monies to get it up to $1 million, but we're only going to go up to so far. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're limited as to what we can pay.
Okay. Well, Carol asked that, she points out that the canal leaves the impression of man-made. What is the classification of the waterway? Is the Morris Canal designated a C1 watercourse? And do your open space areas have any threats from pipelines coming through your open space, such as natural gas, fossil fuel distributions?
So from what I've seen on the mapping, the canal is not categorized as C1. In some areas, it'll temporarily hold water. There aren't many areas that I know of that hold water year round. It does show up on the mapping as as being like a tributary, as wetlands, but I haven't seen the C1 classification show up on it. And it's I would say too that sections of the canal can be very different. Some are bone dry, some are only wet in the spring, and then they're dry the rest of the year, and then some are pretty wet year round, but maybe not not holding a lot of water, not real deep. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how all of that is classified, but generally I do see it as mapped as wetlands. And I'm not aware of any pipeline projects that are passing through our open space or even farmland. I know in Hunterdon County that's been an issue, but we haven't seen it in Warren.
Okay. Now, I think you already answered this question, but Dan asked, is your offer to landowners the same as the appraised value? And you mentioned that you get 2 appraised values. Are you obligated the highest of the appraised values, the lowest, or anything?
Yeah, so generally what we offer is the certified market value. So we get 2 appraisal reports, we send it down to the state. This is in either program. And then they certify a value. So for farmland, it'll be an easement value. Green Acres, it'll be an outright purchase value. And so that's our policy in Warren County has always been to offer the certified value. There are times where the County Ag Development Board or the Board of Rec may recommend to the county commissioners that it's an important project, or the appraisals, they think the appraisals were off, and they might recommend that some additional amount be paid, either up to the highest appraisal value or some other amount. But that's sort of a case-by-case basis. In general, the certified market value is the offer value.
And are these appraisers frequently the same ones approached time and again by the state? So there might be a motivation on their part to give slightly lower values to lands to make it easier for the state to acquire, or do you think there's objective and the
So the appraisers that we use, they have to be approved by the state, and then the county, we have our own approval process, and then on each project, and this is for Warren County, I don't know about the other counties in their process, but in Warren County, we then do a request for proposal. And so, whatever the 2 lowest cost appraisers are, so they might charge, say, $1,000, $2,000 for an appraisal. They'll get the job. So we see probably a handful of, the same appraisers, frequently being the lowest, bidders. We do see some, new or different ones occasionally. But for the most part, I'd say most of the appraisals are probably done in Warren County by maybe 5 appraisers, but it varies. You don't know who's going to get what project.
Okay. And Ann Van Heis asks, how is it more affordable to the future farmers of that land?
Right. Yeah. So, and sorry, I mentioned that, but I didn't really explain it well. So if you have a farm, right, and it's with its development value, maybe it's selling for $1 million, and then we preserve it, we pay them $400,000, and then afterwards that farm would sell for $600,000, and so in that regard, the property is now less expensive than it would be, if it still had its development value. One of the problems we do have, I think, is the program, we've prioritized large farms, and it's kind of a complicated issue, but we have a lot of large farms that are preserved, and a lot of new farmers, beginner farmers, are still having trouble accessing farmland. The smaller farms are still too expensive. We're trying to now move towards preserving more of these smaller farms. Hopefully that will make them more accessible.
That's good. Let me ask you this, Corey. I know that these preserved farmlands don't necessarily allow public access. And yet in Europe, they have a lot of open lands where people can go hiking through different farmlands. Is there some type of incentive where you might offer the farmer a few extra dollars so a trail can go through their property?
Yeah. So actually, we have done that. We have a county, trail plan, or if a municipality, has a trail plan where we identify the need for the trail in advance. We've been able to do that. So we have simultaneously preserved a farm, and then we've also taken a public trail easement over a portion of that farm. And actually, the O'Dowd farm is an example where we did that. We put a trail through part of the farm. I know in Europe there's a different sort of right to roam, which we don't have a history here of recognizing that as strongly. So yeah, as long as it's possible, as long as you plan ahead. I don't think that the SADC at the state level would permit a public trail easement afterwards. I don't think that's impossible, but I think there's a separate procedure that would have to go through, I think, to condemn the land for a public trail purpose, and that would require state house approval and so forth. So,
well, what about this, Corey? What about the default being that any preservation would avail the public access through a certain portion that that could be agreed upon ahead of time, even without a trail, and then they can argue that they don't want a trail, and then you can adjust the you can negotiate independent of that. Just make it the default, allow people to go have some portion of the land to walk on, or or even better, for certain portions of the land to preserve for pollinators or something, like certain incentives. Just make that the default, and then they can argue against it. Is there a possibility of doing that?
Yeah, so I think anything's possible. I think that would meet a lot of resistance by the agricultural community. I think until, I'm sure there are some farmers that would be quite all right with it. I think a lot of the farmers still would maybe not, wouldn't go that route. I think they would still, I think the reason too that was emphasized is one of the big objections to farmland preservation, and it's not easy to convince farmers to preserve their land. But I think that that was one of their concerns that they had expressed years ago. And so that was not included in ARDA, the Agricultural Redevelopment Act. So I think, you know, a lot of the farmers I know, I think would still be reticent to allow general public access. Other farms, you know, it depends on their business model. You know, if they're a farm stand and they have a pick your own operation and you know, their business is inviting the public onto their farm, I think they would be more amenable to that. Whereas maybe some of the traditional, you know, farmers who are doing, you know, crops and grains and so forth with machinery, you know, see it more as a liability.
Okay, now we have I have to allow some space on time for Tracy to give a short talk on, but we have about 13 more comments. I want to try to go quickly through some of these, okay? Tony asked, what kind of warehouse developmental pressure is Warren County experiencing, particularly from the Lehigh Valley?
Yeah, we're seeing an increase in warehouse development applications. There are different industrial zones around Warren County. The municipalities set the zoning, but a lot of that is on farmland. Excuse me, and it's you know, compared to other areas, it's the farmland is you know, less expensive, and so that makes it desirable. But the county planning department recently released a transportation plan. Prior to that, they had a review of the potential impact on, you know, transportation infrastructure if all these industrial areas were built out. It is you know, it's a very large concern in Warren County. It's a difficult problem. You know, the municipalities have a lot of control, probably the most control over what happens there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anna also mentions that, you know, she knows someone with a preserved farm and they're trying to sell it and they can't find a buyer because of the preservation restrictions. It's not so much a question, it's just that a statement. Do you find that?
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I don't generally find that. I think for the most part, the preserved farms sell well in Warren County, and often they sell, you know, just as quickly as an unpreserved farm. There can be, we've had one farm I know of that it was preserved without a house on it, and it was preserved without an exception area that would allow a house. And so that parcel I remember being for sale for quite some time, and we received dozens of calls about it. And you know, they had difficulty selling that because there was no opportunity to build a house with it. And so that might be an issue for a particular farm.
Mm-hmm. Donna asks about when politicians aren't in favor, how does getting a ballot referendum require them to work with the farm preservation program?
So well, yeah, so you'd have to just resort to your normal political process. So I'm not sure, I guess it depends on the ballot measure. I know there's binding and non-binding referendums. And honestly, I'm not all that familiar with that. So that's something that, you know, you'd have to look into as to whether or not that would, if you had the right type of referendum, maybe you could compel the leadership to do something. But normally I think it would just be normal, you know, your normal political process, whatever that would be.
Okay. And Marty, it's just making a comment that there was a interesting Tri-County sustainability meeting about agrovoltaics. So folks, if you're interested, you can look at that in the chat. He has information about that. I want to get down to some other questions. We've got a lot of good jobs here. How about the county addressing traffic issues with individual townships approving warehouse projects?
Yes, yeah. So, and that's outside of my department, so it's not my area of expertise. But I know that our county planning department did just recently release a transportation plan Prior to that, they had engaged a professional to investigate the impacts of warehouse and light industrial development around the county. And it is, I don't have the stats in front of me, but it is very concerning, the impact that that could have on our roads, bridges, transportation infrastructure.
Okay, let's see here. And then Marty again is bringing up the YouTube page about the agrovoltaics. So the last one was from Karen. Would you have the name of your counterpart in Hunterdon?
For farmland preservation, it's Bob Hornby. And I think the open space is just through their planning department, but I'd have to check.
Okay, well, 3 cheers for you, Corey. You did a wonderful job tonight, and clearly you've proven yourself that you are the go-to person, certainly for Warren County in terms of preserving land. I know that Donna mentions that there is an effort to help preserve a farm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And so if you have a passion for preserving those precious lands, you can give her a contact. And you're getting a lot of excellence and thank yous again.
Oh, thank you.
Great job, Corey. I appreciate it.
I forget about Tracy.
Thank you.
Yes,
It's my pleasure.
you don't forget about Tracy. Tracy's she's ready and willing right now. So thanks again, Corey. And here you go, Tracy.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Forget me at your peril. See what happens. So, my name is Tracy Heisler. I'm the board president for the Skylands Preservation Alliance. You may have heard about our work with fighting the development of warehouses on farm parcels in Franklin Township. The township had designated 2 farm plots at the southern end of the township, also the southern end of the county, as industrial development, even though historically they've been farmland for nearly 100 years. One parcel, the Tobias Farm, sold for almost $5.5 million for 112 acres, which is why I asked Corey the question about how can you keep up with money like that for 112 acres. So our organization had challenged the DEP's designation of not acknowledging some waterways that were on that land. It had gone through a couple of years of litigation. We found out on Earth Day that we had prevailed. The DEP reversed themselves, acknowledged the waterways that were on that parcel. So while it is still zoned for warehouse development, they cannot put in a 1.2 million square foot building as they anticipated. So we're waiting to see if the developer is going to revise or withdraw the application that's currently pending before the Franklin Township Land Use Board. The adjoining parcel is the Heritage Farm. It is under, there is a concept plan that's out there, and the developer has not officially purchased the land yet, but they are working through the process. We have an environmental engineer who has been reviewing the things that have been submitted at the DEP level, and so far they have all been conforming and appropriate. So we're waiting to see what happens there. We at Skylands have been successful so far in blocking this kind of inappropriate development in Franklin Township. We are hosting on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. a town hall forum for any groups like ours that are fighting these different fights, whether it's Lopatcong or Sussex County or Washington or wherever you happen to be. If you want to join us, tell us about the project that you're working on, and we can see if we can work together and help each other. This is a really isolating kind of experience when you are fighting the good fight and there's only 5 or 6 of you, if that many, with these various projects. So we want to see if we can help each other. If you're interested in that, you can contact us at skylandspa@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat. And we hope you can join us via Zoom. Does anybody have any questions about,
Actually, I do, Tracy. Do you have any update on the White Township development?
I do not, only what I've been following on their Facebook page. I had some correspondence earlier today with Teresa Chapman, but about something else. I can't speak meaningfully to it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Because I know I believe that's right along the Delaware River, and that's impacting on essentially a national park unit, the Delaware Scenic Waterway. It's so they might have federal protections there too. I don't know if they're aware of that.
So it looks like Sarah Hare is in here as well. Sarah, do you mind coming on and giving a little update on White Township, because you know far more than I do?
Tracy, there are others on this call as well. Gail Howard, I don't know if anyone else is here, but who are as knowledgeable. But you know, we are fighting the White Township warehouse applications. It's in, you know, process of Jandal testimony right now. The next meeting, planning board meeting, is on June 14th. I believe it will be Zoom again. Gail, you may know that better than I. And we encourage everyone to come, and, you know, we have an engineer as part of, the group is Citizens for Sustainable Development, and we do have an engineer who speaks up, and a number of people who are experts involved in this effort, including our partnership with the New Jersey Highlands Coalition and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And it's been 3 years in the process. You know, we were, I don't want to say we, but our group participated in pushing to encourage the township to pass an amendment which is preventing further warehouse development in the town, because they won't allow, you know, such large developments now. But that does not apply to the application that's already in progress. So we're in the middle. I believe the next planning board meeting will be addressing stormwater runoff. It just is finishing looking at karst soil and all of that. So we've just heard testimony on that. And it's just moving forward.
Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate that very much. And I don't think it's inappropriate at this point to encourage you, if this is something that is an important issue for you as you are heading to the ballot box in the fall, that if you want to change what's happening in your community, sometimes that means a change of leadership. And you know, we at Skylands don't endorse any candidates or anything, but just be informed about who is going to protect these spaces against development.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Well, folks, what a spirited and interesting discussion we had tonight. And we, again, Corey and Tracy, I want to thank you. And folks, just a reminder, Tracy is actually going to be giving that walk and talk in August. So keep your eyes open for that. We're going to have it published in the Sierra newsletter. It's going to be on the meetup page, and we want you to come and picnic with us. So for that, I think that's all for tonight. And again, have a wonderful summer, and I'll see you at Heritage Park in August and at a general meeting in September. Bye-bye, folks. Good night.